As you might already know, biology is the study of life. Biology studies the structure, function, growth, origin, evolution, and distribution of living organisms. There are generally considered to be at least 9 major fields of biology, each of which consist of multiple subfields. Biochemistry is the study of the material substances that make up living things. Botany is the study of plants, including agriculture. Cellular biology is the study of the basic cellular units of living things. Ecology is the study of how organisms interact with their environment. Evolutionary biology is the study of the origins and changes in the diversity of life over time. Genetics is the study of heredity. Molecular biology is the study of biological molecules. Physiology is the study of the functions of organisms and their parts. Zoology is the study of animals, including animal behavior. Adding to the complexity of this enormous idea that is biology is the fact that these fields overlap. It's impossible to study zoology without knowing a great deal about evolution, physiology, and ecology. You can't study cellular biology without knowing biochemistry and molecular biology as well. There are certain properties that must be met for an organism to be considered alive. The first is order. We can see in the sunflower on the right it's highly ordered, but molecules in living things are arranged in very specific structures. The second is homeostasis or regulation. The example is a jackrabbit with its large ears for temperature regulation. In order to function properly, cells need to have appropriate conditions such as proper temperature, pH, and appropriate concentrations of diverse chemicals. These conditions may, however, change from one moment to the next, and so organisms are able to maintain internal conditions within a very narrow range almost constantly, despite environmental changes through homeostasis, which literally means steady state. The ability of an organism to maintain constant internal conditions. Energy utilization, as we can see with the hummingbird feeding on the flower. Living things need to capture and use energy, and that's what we know as metabolism. Photosynthesis is metabolism in plants, where they convert sunlight into energy. Organisms must be able to grow and develop. There's patterns determined by heredity, and those traits are passed to the offspring by the parents. Reproduction. Living things have the ability to reproduce their own kind. Simple life forms such as bacteria reproduce by dividing and making almost exact replicas of themselves. More complex organisms reproduce sexually so that their offspring have genetic material from two individuals. Offspring with traits from both parents have a greater chance of survival because they're better able to adapt. Response to stimuli. Living organisms respond to changes in their environment. In this example, the Venus flytrap, once 2 hairs are triggered in its mouth, catches the dragonfly. And that is also going to connect back to energy use as it is eating that fly. The last one, arguably the most important, is evolutionary adaptation. Living things evolve in such a way that future generations are adapted to unique situations in their surroundings. For example, the hammerhead shark, considered to be perhaps the most highly evolved species of shark, has superior vision and sensory perception due to its hammer-shaped head. Organisms that cannot adapt to a changing environment decline or become extinct. Biological organization is the hierarchy of complex biological structures and systems that define life using a reductionist approach where each level represents an increase in complexity, each object being primarily composed of the previous level's basic unit. The atom is the most basic level of matter that biology cares about. Atoms come together to form molecules, and in turn, molecules come together to form the basic organelles such as the mitochondria. Each organelle has a specialized function, but they're not considered alive. The cell is the basic unit of structure and function with all living things. They do all the processes that keep organisms alive, but they can also have specialized functions, say a nerve cell or a blood cell or a bone cell. Tissues are groupings of cells. Specialized cells work together to form a specific function: muscle tissue, epithelial tissue, connective tissue. If you move on to organs, are going to be a group of 2 or more different types of tissue that work together to form a specific job. It's generally more complex than that of the tissue. The heart is made up of muscle and connective tissues which function to pump blood throughout an animal. Flowers, roots, and stems are organs in a plant. Organs come together to form systems, for example, the nervous system or the reproductive system. Each organ system has its own function, but the systems work together and depend upon each other. Organ systems come together to form the organism or the species, and that's the individual living organism, in this case, a lion. Organisms of the same species can reproduce to make more of that species. All of the individuals of a given species in a specific area or a region at a certain time are a population. So groupings of lion, a pride of lions. These members will compete for food, water, space, and mates. If you take all the different populations in a specific area or region at a certain time, you will form a community. They involve many types of interactions among the populations, competing for resources, and so on. One or more communities in an area and the abiotic factors including water, sunlight, oxygen, temperature, and soil is an ecosystem. So in this case we have zebras and giraffes and insects and air and water and soil. And biomes are individual ecosystems grouped together according to the climate, the predominant vegetation, and characterized by adaptations of organisms to that particular environment. They do tend to be contiguous, but say, for example, the savanna where the lions live can occur in more than just Africa. And then if you take all of that together, every single form of living thing and non-living thing on the planet and the areas that support life, you form the biosphere. As I mentioned before, each level of organization has emergent properties. We try to study life using reductionism, or the idea that every complex phenomenon can be explained by analyzing the simplest, most basic physical mechanisms that are in operation during the phenomenon. However, when units of biological material are put together, the properties of the new materials are not always additive or equal to the sum of the properties of the components. Instead, new properties and rules emerge that cannot be predicted by observations. Synergy, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So, emergent properties, life is an example of this. A single cell bacteria is alive, but if you separate the macromolecules that combine to create it, the units are not alive. Based on our knowledge of macromolecules, we would not have been able to predict that they could combine to form a living organism, nor could we have predicted all of the characteristics of that resulting bacteria. To wrap up this introduction to biology, you need to go over some of the major themes that you're going to see recurring in the course. The first is evolution, the foundational theory, the most important theme in biology. Nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution, as the quote says here. If you go looking for it, you'll be able to find an aspect of every living creature out there that is in fact a product of evolution. How did life get to be the way that it is? Evolution, that's how. Evolution is a change in heritable traits of biological populations over successive generations, and is going to give rise to diversity at each level of organization. The second major theme is energy flows and matter cycles. The laws of thermodynamics tell us that net entropy must always go up. We are a closed system here on planet Earth, so our matter is going to constantly be recycled through organisms. It may change chemical forms, but the matter is staying here. However, energy is eventually, ultimately lost as heat to the environment and is no longer in a form that is useful to organisms. So matter cycles, but energy flows and is lost. The third is structure is equal to function. A function is the reason some object or process occurs in a system. It evolved through a process of natural selection. Form and function is one of the central themes. However, necessarily knowing the structure does not reveal its function all the time. Function is not the same as purpose. Don't get into the idea that evolution is goal oriented. Trees do not grow flowers for any purpose, but does so simply because it has evolved to do so. To say a tree grows flowers to attract pollinators would be incorrect if the two implies purpose.
Unity and diversity is something you'll see often. Certain structures and processes may be common to many or all life forms, but nature has modified them in diverse ways, resulting in a tremendous range of variation. And the last one is one we've talked about before, homeostasis, maintaining that internal status quo. Let's face it, life is a control freak. Everything is regulated, and when regulation fails, the results are generally not good. Many processes are controlled by feedback mechanisms, and that is how homeostasis works. The first type of feedback is positive feedback, so the output enhances the original stimulus. I put more in, I get more out. But keep in mind that also works the other way. It also could be negative, negative. I take more out, I get less. Negative feedback is a little different. Negative feedback, as one goes up, the other goes down. The rate of the process decreases as the concentration of the product increases.